very interesting story coming in by the way of Israeli chipmaker Tower Semiconductor proposing to set up an $8 billion full-fledged fabrication plant in India. If this goes through, firstly, this is going to be one of the biggest investments that will come in India by the way of a semiconductor plant, and then this is going to be an all-out fab. We haven't had one.
Absolutely. You're right, Shweta. I think, yeah, so this has been reported by the Indian Express. We don't really have an official confirmation yet from Tower Semiconductor or from the government of India, but apparently talks have gone through, and it seems that, you're right, $8 billion worth of a fab plant, a manufacturing of semiconductor
not
plant.
Not just packaging, not just researching, a proper full-fledged plant.
65 nanometers NM and a 40 NM fab manufacturing plant likely to come up in India. If you remember, Shweta, you know, just around the time when the Israel-Palestine conflict had kicked off, we had, or the Israel-Hamas conflict had kicked off in early October, there was news of Intel looking at acquiring Tower Semiconductor. And that deal did not go through. And in fact, that is the time when Tower Semiconductor was already in talks with Indian authorities to set up a $3 billion plant in Karnataka. But those talks, given the merger talks between Intel and Tower Semiconductor, those talks sort of, you know, were left on the wayside, and that investment never came in. Better late than never, and better at 8 billion than 3 billion, I would say. But yeah, I think this is going to be a new chapter if the investment goes through in semiconductor manufacturing finally taking off in India.
Absolutely.
Remember, we've got OSAT, which is the outsourced, outsourced assembly and testing of semiconductors. That is the investment which, in fact, not just assembly and testing, but even packaging is something we are seeing with Micron, which is likely to have its plant up and running this year. The first lot of semiconductors assembled and packaged in India coming out in 2025, which was announced during Vibrant Gujarat by Sanjay Malhotra, the CEO of Micron. In addition to that, we've seen Vedanta wanting to make manufacturing commitments for semiconductors. The deal with Foxconn did not go through. Foxconn itself has tied up with HCL and is looking at the OSAT to come up in India, but that again is going to be just testing and assembly. But what is going to really aid India's overall manufacturing when it comes to automobiles, smartphones, electronics, any sort of thing that requires technology circuitry to work, it is really going to be the advantage of the semiconductor fab. But to my mind, Israel, while looking at setting up perhaps, or Tower Semiconductor looking at setting up a 65 nm and 40 nm plant in India, is pretty much still going to be the end of the line, sort of, you know, the kind of fabs which are soon going to get obsolete and outdated. So eventually India has to move towards the 24, 28 nm you know, assembly and manufacturing plants. But I think it is going to be the 65, 40 nm is going to be setting the ground, skilling the workforce, ensuring that you have, you know, at least that first lot of manufacturing happening in India, and then gradually add more skilled manpower, elevate your manpower, and get newer machines, more investments, and get to that race of 20 nm and below.
And let's also put this in context. India has a very ambitious semiconductor mission plan, a corpus of $10 billion has been set aside. So if the proposal by Tower Semiconductors goes through, they will get a capital subsidy on expenditure to the tune of 50%. So $4 billion may just come from Indian government's coffers.
So 76,000 crore rupees when rupee dollar was exchanged at about 76 rupees. So it was $10 billion which was set aside by the government. Right now, outside of Micron, we haven't really seen anybody else take advantage of that outlay. Right. So Micron also, with a $2 billion investment in India, is looking at just about $1 billion worth coming from that outlay of the government for semiconductors. Now, if this $8 billion investment is to go through, we are looking at another $4 billion of that outlay being utilized. So that is about $5 billion, which is 50% of the total outlay for semiconductors by way of incentives which the government has kept aside. I think the rest of it will soon, hopefully,
and then there is also state subsidy,
and there is state subsidy. You're right.
So eventually, net for Micron, they only had to invest over $800 million to set up that plant. The numbers for Tower would also come down below $4 billion
or just about around $4 billion. Right. So yeah, but you still have another $5 billion after the the Tower Semiconductor deal goes through, if it goes through, for companies like Foxconn and Vedanta and others to mop up. So yeah, I think that story should progress well.
Absolutely. $5 billion up for grabs when it comes to chip making in India. So whoever sends up next proposal could be looking and vying at that corpus which has been set aside for chip making capabilities under India's very ambitious semiconductor mission plan.